All right, I know we do have quite a few items to discuss today, so I don't want to take too long. So why don't we go ahead and get started? So we'll start the work group now. So good morning, everyone. My name is Manuel Aguila. I'm an air pollution specialist in the Mobile Source Control Division at CARB. I'm joined today by my supervisor, Jessica Johnson.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Johnson. I'm a supervisor at CARB overseeing the program we're talking about today.
Hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Diana Friedrich. I work in the Fuels and Transportation Division at the California Energy Commission. And I'll pass it off to my supervisor, Lorraine.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Lorraine Gonzalez, supervisor of the School Bus Replacement Program at the Energy Commission.
Thank you. So today we'll be discussing Year 2 implementation for HVIP Public School Bus Set-Aside and the complementary Energize Infrastructure funding. Year 2 funding is an allocation from the state's fiscal year 22-23 budget. The funding is designed to assist school districts transition their school bus fleets to zero emission. Before we get started, a little information on our workgroup logistics. So today's workgroup is being recorded, and a copy of the recording along with the list of our workgroup attendees will be posted on CARB's Low Carbon Transportation webpage within the next 2 weeks. Today's workgroup is really intended to be a conversation. So throughout the presentation, we'll just pause for questions and comments. And as always, we appreciate your patience if we run into any technical glitches. Next slide, please. On the agenda for today, we will take a quick poll to see who's here. We'll lay out the goals of the work group. And for those of you unfamiliar with HVIP Public School Bus Set-Aside, I'll briefly discuss the program background. We will go over School Bus Set-Aside for Year 1, which received a funding allocation from 21-22 fiscal year. Diana will provide information on the complementary Energize Infrastructure funding. We'll then move on to discuss Public School Bus Set-Aside for Year 2, which received funding from the 22-23 state budget. We will discuss the anticipated Year 2 funding timeline. We will also have some time for an open discussion to discuss topics chosen by today's audience. And we will also begin the wrap up with some information on additional funding available and end with some information on the next steps. Okay, next slide, please. So before we jump into substance of the work group, we request today's audience attendees to take a quick poll to give us an idea of the composition of the audience by letting us know what type of organization each of our audience members represents. The options include school district or local educational agency, third-party school transportation provider, local or regional government, federal agency, public attendee, school bus dealer or manufacturer, consultant, utility provider, or other. And we'll give our attendees some time to respond to the poll. Excellent. So it looks like a majority of our attendees are from local or regional governments. We also have a good amount from our school district, the local educational agency, school bus dealer and manufacturers and consultants, and others. We have a good amount. So thank you very much for taking the poll. Next slide, please. Now, on to the purpose of the work group. Today, the goals of the work group are to receive feedback from you, our audience, either experienced in zero-emission school bus transition, or those who may be interested in applying for Year 2 of the School Bus Set-Aside. There may also be some of you that are unsure if zero-emission school buses are right for your school district. We always encourage sharing your thoughts during this work group. Our second goal is to have a discussion with potential applicants about the year one application process and any suggestions for year two. Our third goal is to discuss the needs of school districts that may help in the transition to zero-emission school buses. Again, this is something where we want to gather as much information as we can from our audience to help make the transition to new zero emissions as easy as possible. So we would definitely like to hear from you. As a note, we will not be discussing the upcoming CARB funding plan, nor will we be discussing voucher amounts for school bus set aside year two today. Those topics will be discussed during future work group meetings. Next slide, please. Now, a little bit of background on year two set aside. So public school bus set aside. Year two of the HVIP school bus set aside funding is part of a multi-year commitment to prioritize deployment of zero-emission school buses and their accompanying infrastructure. Funding was allocated from the 21-22 and 22-23 fiscal year budgets to assist school districts with the transition. From the past two fiscal year budgets, CARB received a total of $265 million for vehicle incentive from the state federal fund. Funding for the school bus set aside is administered through HVIP. In addition to the vehicle funding, CEC received $35 million in funding for the accompanying charging infrastructure. The infrastructure funding is a complementary component to HVIP school bus set aside and is administered through CEC's Energize program. The focus of the school bus set aside funding is for underserved rural school bus fleets that directly benefit priority populations and improve air quality in disadvantaged communities by providing funding to assist in accelerating the transition to zero-emission school bus fleets. Next slide, please. Here, we note the current program requirements for year one of the set aside. As noted earlier, funding is administered through HVIP and Energize. The year one funding listed eligible applicants as public school districts, public charter schools, joint power authorities, county offices of education, and division of state special schools of the California Department of Education, located within small and medium-sized air districts with a prioritization on those school districts within disadvantaged communities. To identify which communities are disadvantaged, CARB utilized CalEnvirus Screen, which identifies vulnerable communities that are disproportionately burdened by environmental factors, such as pollution. The purpose of targeting small and medium air districts is due to the reduced funding availability for incentive programs for school bus replacement compared to large air districts. The list of air districts and their size can be found in the HVIP Implementation Manual, Appendix G, which also provides information and guidance specific to the school bus set aside. As for what technology is available, new replacement school buses are required to be zero emission and capable of bidirectional electricity flow, commonly known as V2G capable. The HVIP set-aside funding for school buses also has a scrappage component, which differs from standard HVIP. So standard HVIP does not require a school bus to be scrapped to participate in the program and is intended to provide a voucher amount for the incremental cost of a new zero-emission school bus. To receive funding for the set-aside, school districts must commit to scrapping an older internal combustion engine school bus. The old school bus is required to be model year 2007 or older and must be scrapped within 12 months of receipt of the new zero-emission school bus. Additional requirements can be found in the HVIP Implementation Manual, Appendix G. Next slide, please. Now, let's talk about the first year of funding. Year one of the set-aside received $130 million allocation from state general funds from fiscal year 21-22 for school bus replacements. The application window for year one opened March 30th and closed June 28th, 2022. Purpose of the 98-day application period was to allow school districts with limited resources sufficient time to submit an application for school bus replacement. Awards for this funding were not on a first come, first served basis. Rather, all school districts located within a small and medium-sized air district were eligible to apply within the application period. Priority for funding was given to those school districts located in disadvantaged communities. The application period worked out exceedingly well for year one, becoming oversubscribed within the 90-day application period. Year one received applications from 97 different school districts, totaling almost 370 replacement school buses. Of those applicants, we have been able to award 82 school districts, totaling more than 300 replacement school buses. Each of those school districts are in various stages of the replacement process, and we look forward to the delivery of the new school buses. We are proud and excited for the number of applications received and the number of school districts that have committed to replace their old internal combustion school buses with new zero-emission school buses. I'll now turn it over to Diana at the CEC to provide some information on the complementary energized infrastructure funding.
Thank you. So 20 million was allocated to the energized public school bus set aside for year one. Applications first opened on October 14, 2022. School districts who are awarded through the HVIP set aside are guaranteed complementary funding through Energize for infrastructure. However, school districts will still need to meet the minimum qualifications of the Energize project and comply with all terms and conditions. For year one, we had 41 applications received for infrastructure. Next slide. This slide gives an overview of the eligible costs under the Energized Public School Bus Set Aside. There are 3 types of charging equipment eligible for reimbursement. Level 2, direct current fast charger, and bidirectional chargers. Only one DC fast charger can be eligible for a school district. Examples of other approved costs are also listed on this slide. Next slide.
Now, on to the current fiscal year 22-23 funding for the set aside, also known as year 2. Year 2 set of $135 million for the replacement of old school buses through HVIP. An additional $15 million in funding was allocated to Energize for the installation of the accompanying infrastructure. CARB and CEC staff have worked closely to update for year 2, which will help make the transition to zero-emission school buses more efficient. Having said that, we do still want to receive feedback from today's audience for suggestions on how to further improve the process of implementation for year 2. And there will be a chance to provide feedback on this shortly. Next slide, please. There we go. All right, here we have a general funding timeline for year 2. We're expecting to open up applications summer of this year. We're looking to give at least the same 90-day application period for year 2 as we did for year 1, with the potential to provide additional time to account for school closures in summer months. This initial step will collect information for HVIP school bus set aside, as well as information for Energize infrastructure through a single application, making the process more efficient. Applications received from priority applicants will be reviewed on a continual basis prior to the close of the application review window. Applicants will be notified of the next step in the process once the initial review is completed. Once the application period is closed, which again will be at least 90 days from the date of the opening of application acceptance, we anticipate a 30-day review period to determine funding status for all outstanding applications received. Once the funding list is generated, applicants who have not yet received word of their status will be advised of funding status around fall of this year. And if selected to move on to the next step, will be contacted by Energize to accelerate infrastructure discussions. By spring of 2024, we're anticipating terms and conditions for school bus and agreements for infrastructure to be executed. Once these items are signed, the school bus purchase order and start of construction should not be far behind. When the new school bus is received, the 12-month clock for scrapping the old school bus will start, and once the bus is scrapped and infrastructure is installed and commissioned, the project can be closed out. Next slide, please. There we go. Okay. Any questions that the audience may have regarding thoughts or suggestions for the application process and the timeline for year 2? If you'd like to make a comment or ask a question, please use the. So for those of you, please click on the raise hand application bar under the participants tab. For those using Zoom on a mobile application, please click on the raise in the More tab. And for those who are participating by telephone, please press #2 to raise your hand. When it's your turn to speak, we will call your name and unmute your line. Note that you may still need to ensure that you are unmuted on your own device. So please make sure to state your name and affiliate.
Manny, your audio was going out a little bit there. Would you mind going ahead and repeating the instructions for folks that want to participate in the comment period?
Yeah, of course. So for those using Zoom online, please click on the raise hand option in the Zoom navigation bar under the participants tab. For those using Zoom on a mobile application, please click on the raise hand option in the More tab under the More tab. And for those by telephone, press #2 to raise your hand. Again, when it's your turn to speak, we will call your name and unmute your line. Note that you may still need to ensure that you are unmuted on your own device. And please make sure to state your name and affiliation when called upon.
All right. Elena Gienko, I have unmuted your line. Please state your full name and affiliation before asking a question.
Hi, my name is Elena Gienko. I'm with California Energy Commission, Energy Assessments Division. I'm so glad to see my colleagues here from Fuels and Transportation. So I've been, if you guys know me, I've been doing the transportation energy demand forecast, and we do have specific forecast for school buses, giving all the fuel types. And my question is regarding one of the first slides on the goals. And can you go to that slide, please? Yes. So could you please clarify the current status of investments for zero-emission and near zero-emission school buses in rural areas? We all understand that the use cases for rural areas are not necessarily, battery electric. And I'm aware of many federal funds that still fund, propane buses, school buses, and some cases of natural gas. I'm not sure if that program has already completely stopped, or are there going to be any future investment in that specific fuel type? And also, given the fact that school buses are public transportation, especially in emergency services, like in long distance, and as you know, there are so many current emergencies in the state. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. So to kind of give you a little bit of background on that, the Rural School Bus Pilot Program, which did fund, is funding about 180 school buses through 2025, both zero and renewable fuel technologies. School Bus Set Aside also kind of aimed for the rural school districts as well. Trying to make sure that we can provide funding for those underserved communities that typically don't have all the funding that the large air districts. But in terms of future funding, those are things that we're looking at further. Right now, the school bus public school bus set aside is focusing mainly on zero emission technologies. But again, year one was zero emission in rural school bus areas or rural areas.
Thank you, Elena. Michael Miles, I have unmuted your line. Please state your full name and affiliation before asking your question or making your comment.
Good morning. My name is Michael Miles. I'm CTO of a company that's called KurzTech. We're a drivetrain manufacturer. My question has to do with the scrappage of vehicles. Is there any allowance for upfitting or refitting diesel or fuel buses to electric vehicles using third-party configurators?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you very much for asking it. So right now, the school buses California has a really old school bus fleet. So the school buses that we're aiming for are typically the oldest school buses. From our understanding, the repowering of older school buses, the 5 to 7 year old bus range. We're actually aiming to get rid of 2007 and older school buses to completely eliminate the emissions from those school buses throughout the state. So while it is, I think it would be great for us to be able to have kind of making sure that we aim at the oldest school buses in the state.
Thank you, Michael. Mike Sawyer, I have unmuted your line. Please state your full name and affiliation before asking your question or making your comment. And I have okay, there we go.
There we go. Sorry. Good morning, Mike Sawyer, San Marcos Unified School District. I have a two-part question. Would there be consideration given for an extended range battery if there was an option from the manufacturer? I understand it's about $60,000 more than the original price of the bus. And number two, my question is, would there be consideration given for a level 3 DC fast charger? So I'm in the San Diego area and we travel down to San Diego with special needs students, and it's a long range, a long distance to transport students. And then these buses go on to do athletic trips or field trips, and they don't have enough time in between the morning route and the afternoon route to charge all the time. So it'd be nice to have that, relieve that range anxiety if we needed that bus to go do something else. And then when they come back to the yard, using a DC fast charger to quickly recharge it for the afternoon routes. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for your question, Mike. So in terms of the extended battery capacity, we know the options are available, and we are looking at different opportunities for have to consider the cost of transitioning fleets at a slower pace. If we do pay for extended ranges and a much higher cost, then that'd be something that would kind of take away from the ability to get more buses off of the road. But again, this is something where we're looking to gather as much information from our audience. I would definitely welcome you provide any comments, and feel free to reach out to us if you would like to set up anything additional. For the DC fast chargers, I'm not sure I caught all of that question, but I'll let Diana kind of help out with that.
Yeah, so if we feel that, more districts are wanting and feeling like they need more of the funding for, you said the level 3 DC fast chargers, we can definitely consider it. I know we have a set amount set for specifically the direct current fast chargers. I believe it's set at 75,000. So we can take a look at that, and I definitely encourage you to submit your comment as well.
Thank you, Mike. Ralph Trout, I have unmuted your line. Please state your full name and affiliation before asking a question or providing a comment.
Good morning, Ralph Trout with CalSTART. Could you go back to the slide with the timeline, please? I see there you are showing all summer for the application process. Once the school district has selected a voucher and identified the buses, why aren't you beginning the process of request for a new service, utility study, and feasibility right away, knowing that most of the utility studies, whether it be a municipality or a CCA or one of the big IOUs, is going to take many, many, many months. Secondly, within that application process, most of the utilities do have an application fees. One is CARB's intent to close the gap financially with the school districts who need with the application, but also funding to pay for that study. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. In terms of encouraging the districts to communicate with the utilities, the thought is to actually be able to review their application and determine that they are, looks like I might be having some issues. Let me turn off my camera really quickly. Hopefully this helps. So as soon as we determine the eligibility for our school bus applicants to move forward to the next step, we actually do, we're going to be sending them over to Energize to make sure that they get that discussion started on the infrastructure. We encourage everyone to speak to their local utilities even before applying to see, to determine the feasibility of installing infrastructure at their intended site. It's important because, like you said, it does take some time for utilities to actually move forward, that we are getting the districts as moving quickly as much as we possibly can. In terms of the additional cost for the site assessments, CARB is funding the school buses themselves. So the infrastructure would be more of a Energize and CEC component. I think Dana can assist with that one as well.
Yeah, sorry, I kind of missed the second part of the question in terms of the site assessment. Are you asking for the cost barriers or who will cover that?
That is correct. Most of the school districts don't have sufficient funding, anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 of cash required at the time of the application. So who's going to close that gap? Energize doesn't have legal authorization to do so because it's an incentive program strictly for the cost and installation of the infrastructure, not for the preparation of the site with regards for the infrastructure. So Energize does not have legal authorization to assist or provide any financial assistance that application process because it's outside of the scope of work.
Okay, we can definitely take into consideration that question and work with our team and see a good strategy we can come up with. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. Richard Tree, I have unmuted your line. Please state your full name and affiliation before asking a question or making a comment.
Good morning, everyone. Rich Tree, supporting Porterville Unified School District. Just a couple comments. First, I do appreciate the coordination between the two programs regarding buses and infrastructure. That's a good progress in that area. Second, potentially there may be a need to encourage school districts to develop a zero-emission bus transition plan to help them start the discussion in regards to the infrastructure. And then last comment in regards to the scrappage, as Porterville Unified being an early adopter in this technology, we do support the scrapping of older buses, but maybe consideration of extending the timeline. We have experienced some reliability challenges and then responsiveness of the OEM to repair the vehicles. And so the strategy for the school district has been to place their older buses in a contingency fleet rather than scrap them because of the need to provide the service. So I hope you consider those comments.
very much for your comments, Richard. If there are any suggestions, I would definitely encourage, or suggestions regarding the amount of time that you're looking, I would definitely encourage you to email myself or my supervisor. We'll have our contact information at the end of the presentation. But like I said, we're always looking to get additional information from anyone that's experienced with the zero or that's looking to get additional information. So we'll provide the contact information and would welcome a conversation with you later on.
Thank you, Richard. Molly Johnson, I have unmuted your line. Please state your full name and affiliation before asking a question or providing a comment.
Good morning. This is Molly Johnson with the Placer County Air Pollution Control District. And as a local air district, we run incentive programs. And so I work very closely with the local school districts in Placer County and have several districts that have applied for and received both HVIP, school bus set aside funding, and Energize funding. And the comments that I have received from them that it has been very challenging for them to understand how to navigate the Energize program. And so I think that you have made the streamlined the application process so that when they're applying for the set aside, they are also applying for Energize, will help with that. But I think that it will also be important for you to recognize that these districts will need sort of one-on-one individualized support. When they are starting this process, a lot of times, as Ralph mentioned, they have no idea how many buses and how many chargers their site can support. And so they haven't done any of that preliminary information, nor have they gone to their board and asked for approval to initiate this process, accept funds, or spend any funds for this fleet electrification plan. And so they have found it very challenging, not so much with the HVIP set aside because the voucher is issued, but through Energize, they've had a difficult time getting confirmation that they have the funding in order to be able to take the project to their board for approval. And so I don't have a specific suggestion about how you would now navigate that or revise the process to be able to address that. But that is what I have heard from my local districts that I'm working with on these projects that has been very challenging for them. The other thing that I wanted to mention that is not necessarily a short-term issue, but is a long-term issue as more districts are acquiring electric school buses, is that the California Highway Patrol and the California Department of Education, as far as I'm aware, they do not allow any driver testing on electric school buses. And so as fleets start to transition and remove school buses from their diesel school buses from their fleet, then this will be a challenge in terms of having vehicles of school buses available for the drivers to test on. So it seems to me like it might be a good starting point to have a conversation with CDE and CHP, because that will probably be a slow moving process in order to get that revised. But in order to acknowledge that, you know, as diesel buses go away, that there will be a need for drivers to be able to test on electric buses. That was all the comments that I have. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much for your comments, Molly. In terms of the transition and testing with CHP, CARB is in close coordination with CHP and CDE because we are aware of the issue of not being able to test on zero-emission school bus. So we are in the process, and we're hoping to make some provide some additional information here in the near future.
Thank you for the update.
Thank you, Molly. Colin Wilhelm, I've unmuted your line. Please state your full name and affiliation before asking a question or providing a comment.
Colin Wilhelm with Lightning E-Motors. I'm the funding and policy manager here. We are a provider of type A school buses around the country, and we've been working very closely with Energize and HVIP over the past couple of years, along with other programs around the country. And I would like to address scrappage and requirements real quick, and then also zero transmission plans. I think that while I'm in favor of scrappage of old vehicles, and I believe it's a very good incentive, making it a requirement has hurt some programs around the country. New York in particular, Massachusetts as well, have been vastly able to underfund their programs due to high-end scrappage requirements, and that can cause some problems. And I just urge to proceed with caution if it's a requirement, instead of making it more of an incentivized plan, maybe an extra incentive for it, for a scrappage. In regards to zero emission plans, I think that if the state can help provide some funding for some of these more rural and impoverished school districts to develop their zero emission plans, it would greatly benefit these school districts in their transition, and also potentially allow them to deal with a more of a microgrid solution, where they might not be able to beef up their grids through Energize or other avenues. So with that, I will mute myself, and thank you for having this webinar.
Yeah, thank you for your comments, Colin. I would definitely encourage you to submit any additional comments that you may have in regards to the scrappage requirement over to CARB. I know CEC does have some information on potential blueprints for applicants who are looking to convert to zero emission. And then would you be able to provide any of those?
Yeah, we can of course send out any links and for future solicitations as well. We can provide to you, but again, definitely send your comments or any questions you have to either the school bus program, email, or myself.
Thank you, Colin. Mike Sawyer, I have unmuted your line. Please state your full name and affiliation before asking a question or providing a comment.
I don't have a comment. I must have accidentally pushed a button. Sorry.
Gotcha, no problem. Those are all the questions and comments we have at this time.
Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for your comments and questions. We definitely look forward to having additional conversations here in the near future. But like I said, we would welcome you questioning or sending us questions or additional comments. For school buses would be myself or CARB staff, and for the infrastructure would be CEC staff, and we'll provide that contact information at the end of the presentation. But for now, we will move on to the next slide, please. Now, at this point, we would actually like to have more of an open discussion. Here's some guiding questions to hopefully help spur some, in addition to some of the previously noted program requirements. Previous slide, very good. In addition to some of the previously noted program requirements, such as small and medium air districts, school districts in disadvantaged communities, are there any additional criteria that should be considered to determine underserved school districts? Does the audience feel some of the previous criteria should be changed, such as a greater focus on age of school bus or additional school district criteria? Also, what resources do school districts believe would assist in better preparing for the transition to zero emission school buses? Again, this is a discussion period, not strictly for the questions noted above. It is open for discussion from any of our attendees. We want to make sure that you have a voice in this meeting and can assist with making year 2 just as successful in replacing school buses as year 1. As a reminder, if you would like to make a comment or ask a question, please use the webinar feature to raise your hand. For those using Zoom online, please click on the raise hand option on the Zoom participants tab. For those using Zoom on a mobile application, please click on the raised hand option in the More tab. And for those who are participating by telephone, please press #2 to raise your hand. And when it's your turn to speak, we will call your name and unmute your line. Just make sure that you are unmuted on your device as well. And again, make sure to state your full name and affiliation. We'll allow just a little bit more time. Do we have anything on the line, on the phones or anything, William?
No,
No?
no raised hands yet.
Excellent. We have answered everyone's questions for today. I feel great. Just kidding. I know we're going to have more questions, and we definitely look forward to further conversations. But since there's no questions right now, we can go ahead and move on to the next slide. As a reminder, HVIP set-aside funding is not the only funding source available for the purchase of new zero-emission school buses. We would encourage any of our attendees interested in receiving funding for new school buses to contact your local air district, as oftentimes they may have funding available to assist in purchasing new school buses. HVIP Standard is also available now and is an option for school bus funding that we would encourage interested parties to explore. And to reiterate, HVIP Standard covers the incremental cost of zero-emission technology and does not require an old school bus be scrapped for participation. The US EPA also has the Clean School Bus Program, which is another program that has funding to assist with the purchase of new zero-emission school buses. This program received a total allocation of $5 billion and will be available through 2026.
For infrastructure, school districts are also eligible to apply for the EV Fast Track and EV Jumpstart lanes in Energize. The EV Fast Track is targeted towards medium and heavy duty fleets that have received zero-emission vehicle incentives and demonstrate project readiness for EV charging equipment installation. The EV Jumpstart is the equity-focused lane and provides expanded technical support to applicants and larger incentives for projects that benefit a disadvantaged and low-income community or minority-owned business. Also, PG&E, SCE, and SDG&E have rebate programs that school districts may also qualify for. We encourage all school districts to reach out to their local utility to find out how they can apply for additional infrastructure funding. Lastly, I want to mention on March 27th, there will be an electric school bus training workshop where school districts can participate and learn more about future funding opportunities related to training. A link to the school bus training workshop will be provided in the chat. Next slide.
Excellent. Now, the funding discussed during today's work group is not the last available school bus funding. The fiscal year 22-23 state budget also allocated $1.5 billion in funding from Proposition 98 general funds for public school districts. This funding allocates $1.125 billion in funding to CARB for public school bus incentives and $375 million in funding to CEP for accompanying infrastructure and associated costs. We will be holding work groups later this year to discuss the development and implementation of these funds. Funding will be available starting with the 23-24 fiscal year. This, again, is not today's meeting, but will be discussed in future work group meetings later in 2023. As a quick note, you can receive updates for this and other notifications by signing up for Gov Delivery. Gov Delivery information will be provided at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. Now on to the next steps. Again, attendees are welcome to email CARB or CEC staff with questions or comments. Our contact information will be on the next slide. CARB and CEC staff are also happy to meet individually to discuss today's work group topics further. We will also be holding another work group in spring 2023 with anticipated topics to include funding amounts and updated eligibility criteria for year 2. The agenda has not yet been solidified, but will be sent out via Gov Delivery, so make sure to sign up if you are interested. Next slide, please. So on this slide, we do have our contact information. Again, for school buses, feel free to contact myself, Jessica below. For infrastructure comments or questions, feel free to Diana Friedrich or Lorraine Gonzalez at the emails listed on the slide. Looks like I'm having some internet issue again. Let me turn my camera And again, do not forget to sign up for Gov delivery notifications at the link below. This PowerPoint presentation is currently available on online at CARB's website. The recording of this work group, along with the attendee list, will be posted within 2 weeks on CARB's website as well. So prior to ending the meeting, I want to leave some time for any final questions regarding today's topics. CARB and CEC staff will hold on the line for a minute to make sure to address any last questions before ending today's webinar. William, let us know if you have any questions. If you
Will do. All right. Chuck Ray, I have unmuted your line. Please state your full name and affiliation before asking a question or providing a comment.
Hey guys, Chuck Ray here with Microgrid Labs. We have a software for bus fleet electrification. I inadvertently raised my hand. I do not have a question. I apologize.
No worries.
Thank you, Chuck.
All right. It looks like that's about it. So, on behalf of CARB and CEC, I want to thank everyone for joining us today and providing comments and feedback. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. And again, feel free to contact us.